Hello everyone, and welcome back to Snowbound Screams. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten backroads of America, places where light fades, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. Across these hills, rivers, and empty towns are accounts drawn from witness reports, police files, and archived broadcasts. Each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. The Midwest, with its endless highways and sprawling farmlands, holds a particular darkness. Between the cornfields and small towns, where distance itself becomes a character, travelers have encountered phenomena that defy explanation. These are not tales told to frighten, but documented accounts from those who found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. From the truckers who spend their lives on these roads to the families passing through on vacation. Their stories share a common thread, the realization that on certain stretches of American highway, one is never truly alone. Now, let us begin with our first story. It was late October of 2014 when trucker Michael Richardson began his haul from Des Moines to Omaha. At 47 years old, with 22 years of long-haul experience, Richardson knew every mile of Route 6 like the back of his weathered hands. The familiar rhythm of his diesel engine and the steady hum of tires on asphalt had become his life's soundtrack. That particular evening, the sky was clear, but for a thin, crescent moon that cast silver shadows across the Iowa farmland. Richardson had made this run hundreds of times, often through weather far worse than this perfect autumn night. Nothing about the journey seemed unusual as he passed through the small towns of Adel and Stewart, their downtowns already asleep by 9 p.m. The air carried the distinct smell of harvested corn and drying leaves, a scent Richardson associated with the final stretch of his driving season before winter, made the roads treacherous. His CB radio crackled occasionally with the voices of other truckers, their conversations brief and practical road conditions, way station statuses, the occasional complaint about dispatch. Richardson kept to himself mostly, preferring the solitude of the cab with his collection of classic rock and audiobooks. Around 10:30, somewhere between the towns of Casey and Anita, he noticed the first subtle change in his environment. The air seemed to grow heavier, denser, as if the atmospheric pressure had suddenly dropped. His ears popped, a sensation he usually experienced only when gaining elevation in mountainous regions, something Iowa simply did not offer. Richardson glanced at his dashboard gauges, all reading normal. The temperature outside remained steady at 53 degrees Fahrenheit. He attributed the sensation to fatigue, deciding to pull over at the next rest area for coffee. That's when he noticed the second anomaly: his CB radio, which had been maintaining a steady channel 19 frequency, suddenly went completely silent. Not just quiet, but dead in a way that suggested disconnection rather than lack of transmission. Richardson fiddled with the knobs, switched channels, and tapped the unit, all to no avail. The silence that filled his cab was suddenly profound, broken only by the engine and the whisper of tires against pavement. It was then that he saw the lights ahead, not the familiar glow of another vehicle's headlights, but something different, something that moved in ways that headlights simply could not. The lights hovered approximately 20 feet above the center line, pulsing with a soft amber glow that Richardson would later describe as like fireflies, but the size of dinner plates. They appeared to be arranged in a triangular formation, maintaining perfect distance from each other as they drifted slowly across the highway. Richardson slowed his rig to 45 miles per hour, then 30, his foot hovering above the brake pedal. The lights made no sound, cast no beam, and left no trail in the cool night air. They simply existed, defying all logical explanation. Richardson grabbed his phone, intending to document what he was seeing, but the device showed no signal unusual for this stretch of highway, where coverage was typically reliable. As he watched, the formation of lights rotated slowly, changing direction without any discernible mechanism or propulsion. Richardson's heart rate had accelerated, but his years of professional driving kept his hands steady on the wheel. He had encountered strange phenomena before: optical illusions caused by temperature inversions, unusual weather patterns, even once what turned out to be a weather balloon. This was different. This was something that followed no laws of physics he understood. The lights continued their silent dance for approximately 3 minutes, before suddenly accelerating straight upward at impossible speed. Disappearing into the cloudless sky, Richardson pulled his truck to the shoulder, killing the engine and sitting in the sudden, absolute silence. His CB radio crackled back to life almost immediately, as if whatever had caused the interference had departed with the lights. The Adair County Sheriff's Department logged Richardson's call at 11:17 p.m. Deputy Mark Henderson took the report, noting the trucker's calm demeanor and detailed description. "I've been driving these roads for over 2 decades," Richardson had told the deputy. "I know what's normal out here. And that wasn't normal." Henderson noted in his report that Richardson showed no signs of intoxication or psychological distress. 3 other truckers called in similar sightings that night, though none had observed the phenomenon as closely as Richardson. The FAA reported no unusual aircraft activity in the area, and weather satellites showed nothing anomalous. Richardson completed his delivery the next morning, though he admitted to checking his mirrors more frequently than usual. Investigators would later classify Richardson's report as an unexplained aerial phenomenon, one of dozens logged in that region over the past decade. Local media briefly covered the story, but it quickly faded from public attention. Richardson himself never spoke of the incident again, except once in an anonymous interview with a UFO research group. "What bothers me most," he said, "isn't what I saw, but what it means. If something like that can appear and disappear so easily on a major highway, without explanation or acknowledgement from authorities, what else is out there that we simply don't notice?" Richardson continued driving Route 6 for another 5 years before retiring, though he always preferred daytime shifts after that autumn night in 2014. No trace was ever found. It was the summer of 2017 when Sarah and David Chen decided to take the scenic route through northern Illinois on their way back to Chicago from a wedding in Dubuque. The young couple, married just over a year, enjoyed these road trips as opportunities to disconnect from their demanding careers, Sarah as a pediatric resident, David as a software architect. They left Dubuque around noon on a Sunday, taking Illinois Route 71 south rather than the more direct interstate. The June weather was perfect, with clear blue skies and temperatures in the mid-70s. Sarah had packed a picnic lunch, and they planned to stop at one of the small parks along the way. David, an amateur photographer, brought his camera hoping to capture some of the rustic charm of rural Illinois. The landscape unfolded in gentle hills and farmland, punctuated by small towns with names like Elizabeth and Savannah. Sarah drove while David navigated, occasionally pointing out potential photo opportunities. Around 2:30 p.m., they approached the Clay County overpass, a simple concrete structure spanning a small creek. As they neared, David noticed a figure standing at the railing of the pedestrian walkway, a young woman in what appeared to be a pale blue dress, her dark hair caught in the afternoon breeze. Something about her posture struck David as unusual. She seemed perfectly still, almost unnaturally so, facing away from the road, as if watching something in the creek below. "Should we stop?" Sarah asked, noting David's interest in the figure. "She looks like she might be in trouble." David considered this, then shook his head. "I don't know. There's something off about this. Let's just keep going." They passed beneath the overpass, and David instinctively checked his rearview mirror as they emerged on the other side. The woman was gone. The walkway appeared empty. David turned around in his seat, looking back through the rear window. Nothing. "That's weird," he said. "Where did she go?" Sarah glanced over. "Who? The woman at the overpass? Maybe she went down to the creek." "In that dress, and that quickly?" David questioned. "We were only under the bridge for a few seconds." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe she had a car waiting on the other side." But David couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He convinced Sarah to turn around at the next available spot, a farm road about half a mile ahead. When they returned to the overpass, they parked and walked up to the pedestrian walkway. There was no sign of the woman, no footprints in the dirt, no indication anyone had been there recently. The creek below flowed peacefully, nothing unusual to catch the eye. David even climbed down to the creek bank, checking for any disturbance. Nothing. The couple returned to their car, unsettled but trying to rationalize what they had seen. Perhaps they had misinterpreted something. Perhaps the woman had indeed moved with surprising speed. As they drove away, David noticed a historical marker they had missed on their first pass. He pulled over to read it. The marker commemorated the death of a 19-year-old woman who had fallen from the overpass in 1968. Her name was Margaret O'Sullivan, and the marker noted that she had been wearing a pale blue dress at the time of her death. That evening, after arriving home in Chicago, David developed his photographs from the day. Among the images of landscapes and small-town storefronts was one he had taken as they approached the overpass. In the distance, barely visible but unmistakable, was the figure of a woman in a pale blue dress standing at the railing. When he zoomed in on the digital image, something chilled him to his core. The woman appeared translucent, almost transparent, as if she were not entirely there. Sarah, looking over his shoulder, gasped. "That's impossible," she said. She looked completely solid when we saw her. The Chens reported their experience to the Clay County Historical Society, which maintained records of local paranormal phenomena. The historian they spoke with, Eleanor Vance, was not surprised. "The overpass has been the site of numerous sightings over the years," Vance told them. "Most describe exactly what you experienced: a woman in a blue dress who appears and disappears. Some have even reported nearly hitting her with their vehicles, only to find no one there." Vance shared police reports from the 1970s and 80s documenting similar accounts, though in recent years, fewer people had come forward, perhaps assuming they had simply imagined what they saw. David and Sarah returned to their lives in Chicago, but the experience changed them. They became interested in paranormal research, joining several organizations and occasionally participating in investigations. They never fully explained what they had seen that summer afternoon in rural Illinois. "We're both people of science," Sarah later wrote in an online forum. "We believe in evidence and rational explanations. But what we saw defies everything we know about reality. The photograph exists, we've had it analyzed by experts who can find no evidence of manipulation. The historical marker exists. The reports exist. We saw something that day, and we'll never know exactly what it was." The Clay County overpass still stands, carrying Route 71 over the small creek. Margaret O'Sullivan's historical marker remains, weathered but legible. Occasionally, travelers still report seeing a woman in a pale blue dress at the railing, watching the creek below. Most pass by without noticing, their minds focused on destinations and schedules. But for those who pause, who look closely, who remember the story of a young woman's tragic end 50 years ago, the overpass holds a mystery that science cannot explain. No trace was ever found. It was November 2018 when Kansas State Trooper Daniel Morales received the call that would become the last entry in his incident log. At 34, Morales had been with the Highway Patrol for 8 years, working primarily the night shift along Interstate 70 between Salina and Hayes. The flat, seemingly endless stretch of highway was notorious for severe weather, especially in late fall when cold fronts moved down from the Rockies with little warning. On this particular night, temperatures were dropping rapidly, and meteorologists were predicting freezing rain by morning. Morales had just finished his routine patrol and was returning to the Salina station when dispatch alerted him to a report of an abandoned vehicle near the Russell County line. The call came in at 2:13 a.m. from a trucker who had noticed a car pulled over with its hazard lights flashing approximately 2 miles east of exit 184, when the trucker had passed the same spot 30 minutes later on his return journey. The lights were still blinking, but there was no sign of the driver. Dispatch asked Morales to investigate, noting that the vehicle had been reported as a silver sedan with Colorado plates. Morales acknowledged the request, turning his cruiser around and heading west toward the reported location. The highway was nearly empty at this hour, with only occasional truck traffic passing in the opposite direction. Freezing rain had begun to fall, creating a shimmering curtain across Morales' windshield as his wipers struggled to keep pace. Morales found the vehicle exactly where the trucker had described it, a silver sedan parked partially on the shoulder, its hazard lights still cutting rhythmic patterns through the darkness. The car was empty, locked, with no signs of damage or distress. Morales ran the plates, learning the vehicle belonged to a 32-year-old woman from Denver named Jennifer Walsh. A quick check revealed no outstanding warrants or alerts associated with either Walsh or her vehicle. Morales radioed dispatch with this information, requesting they contact the Colorado authorities to check on Walsh's welfare. He then began a methodical search of the immediate area, flashlight beam cutting through the freezing rain as he examined the ground for footprints or other signs of the driver's direction. The terrain around the highway was flat prairie, with only occasional stands of trees or farm buildings breaking the monotony. In the darkness and rain, visibility was limited to perhaps 50 yards in any direction. Morales found no immediate signs of where Walsh might have gone. He returned to his cruiser to wait for backup and further instructions, the engine running to maintain heat against the dropping temperature. The freezing rain intensified, coating his vehicle with a thin layer of ice. Around 3 a.m., dispatch informed him that Colorado authorities had been unable to contact Walsh at her home or workplace. Her last known cell phone ping had been approximately 12 hours earlier, placing her somewhere in western Kansas. Morales requested permission to expand his search area, noting the increasingly dangerous weather conditions. While waiting for approval, he decided to check the nearby overpass at mile marker 183, a common spot for drivers to seek shelter during storms. As he approached the structure, his headlights caught something unusual, a set of footprints leading away from the highway toward the small service road beneath the overpass. The prints appeared fresh, not yet washed away by the rain. Morales followed them carefully, gun drawn, flashlights scanning the darkness beneath the concrete structure. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his career. Huddled in the corner of the underpass was a figure, curled into a fetal position and rocking back and forth. It appeared to be a woman, dressed in light clothing entirely inadequate for the freezing temperatures. As Morales approached, calling out to identify himself as law enforcement, the figure slowly raised its head. The face that looked back at him was pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to reflect no light, only darkness. The woman's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Morales noted with growing unease that despite the freezing rain and dropping temperature, the woman's skin showed no signs of being affected by the cold. No redness, no shivering, no visible discomfort. "Ma'am, are you Jennifer Walsh?" Morales asked, maintaining a safe distance. The woman continued to stare, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from far away, she spoke. "He's coming for you, too." Before Morales could respond, his radio crackled with static, though no one was transmitting. The woman's eyes widened in what appeared to be terror, though she was looking past Morales, toward the highway behind him. Morales turned, flashlight sweeping the darkness, but saw nothing unusual. When he turned back, the woman was gone. The space where she had been moments before was empty. Morales searched the underpass thoroughly, finding no evidence anyone had been there, except for the footprints he had followed, which now ended abruptly in the center of the concrete space, with no corresponding prints leading away. The Russell County Sheriff's Department logged Morales' call at 3:27 a.m. When backup arrived 10 minutes later, they found Morales sitting in his cruiser, visibly shaken but otherwise unharmed. A comprehensive search of the area revealed no sign of Jennifer Walsh or the mysterious woman Morales had encountered. The silver sedan was impounded, and a statewide search was initiated. Jennifer Walsh was never seen again. Her case remains open in both Kansas and Colorado, with investigators noting the unusual circumstances, but offering no official explanation for what happened that November night. Morales continued his law enforcement career for another 2 years before requesting a transfer to administrative duties. In his official statement, he maintained that he had encountered an unknown person beneath the overpass who had disappeared inexplicably. Privately, he told colleagues that he believed he had encountered something supernatural that night, something that had taken Jennifer Walsh and might have taken him as well. "I've seen a lot of strange things on this highway," he told a friend shortly before his retirement. "But nothing like that. The way she looked at me, the things she said. I don't know what happened to Jennifer Walsh, but I know it wasn't something normal. There are things out there on these roads at night that we're not equipped to understand." No trace was ever found. It was July 2016 when the Miller family, Mark, Lisa, and their 12-year-old daughter, Emma, embarked on their annual road trip from St. Louis to Mount Rushmore. Mark, a history teacher, had planned the route to include several historical sites along the way, turning the journey into an educational experience for Emma. They left St. Louis early on a Wednesday morning, driving west on Interstate 70 through Missouri and into Kansas. The summer heat was intense, with temperatures already reaching 90 degrees by mid-morning. By early afternoon, as they approached the small town of Wilson, Kansas, Emma was growing restless in the back seat, and Lisa suggested they stop at the rest area just outside town to stretch their legs. The Wilson rest area was typical of those along this stretch of highway, a small building with restrooms, a few picnic tables under shade structures, and informational plaques about local history and geography. As Mark parked their minivan, Emma immediately spotted the playground equipment near the back of the rest area, asking if she could play for a few minutes. Lisa agreed, following their daughter while Mark used the restroom and checked their route on his phone. The rest area was nearly empty, with only 2 other vehicles parked nearby: a sedan with elderly occupants and a pickup truck with a man sleeping in the driver's seat. The heat shimmered above the asphalt, creating a dreamlike quality to the landscape. When Mark emerged from the restroom, he found Lisa watching Emma on the swings while consulting a brochure about the nearby post-rock scenic byway. The scene appeared perfectly normal. Yet something caught Mark's attention, a sense of stillness that seemed unusual, even for a hot afternoon in rural Kansas. The birds had gone silent, and even the distant sound of traffic from the interstate had momentarily faded. Mark mentioned this to Lisa, who shrugged it off as just a momentary lull. Emma, meanwhile, had grown tired of the swings and was now examining something near the edge of the picnic area. where the manicured lawn gave way to native prairie grasses. "What did you find, sweetie?" Lisa called out. Emma turned, holding up what appeared to be an old photograph. "It was just lying here," she said, approaching her parents with the image. The photograph was sepia-toned, showing a family standing near what looked like the very rest area where they now stood. The clothing and vehicle styles suggested the image was from the 1950s or early 1960s. What made the photograph unsettling was the clarity of the faces, particularly that of a young girl who appeared to be about Emma's age, standing slightly apart from the family group and looking directly at the camera with an expression that seemed both sad and knowing. Mark examined the photo, noting the surprisingly good condition for something that had apparently been lying in the grass. "That's weird," Mark said, turning the photograph over. The back was blank except for a date written in elegant cursive, July 12, 1963. Lisa frowned. Today is July 12th, exactly 53 years later. Emma pointed to the girl in the photograph. "She looks like me." The resemblance was indeed striking, similar hair color and style, similar facial structure, even a similar dress to what Emma was wearing that day. Mark felt a chill despite the oppressive heat. He suggested they return the photograph to the rest area office, assuming someone had lost it and would be looking for it. The attendant on duty, an elderly woman named Mildred, who had worked at the rest area for over 20 years, examined the photograph with growing interest. "I haven't seen this before," she said, her brow furrowed. "But this family, they look familiar." Mildred disappeared into a back room, returning with a dusty photo album. She flipped through several pages before stopping at a newspaper clipping from July 1963. The headline read, "Family Tragedy at Wilson Rest Area." The article told the story of the Henderson family, who had been traveling west when their 7-year-old daughter Sarah had disappeared from the rest area during a brief stop. Despite an extensive search, the girl was never found. The newspaper included a photograph of the family, the same family in the sepia image Mark had found. "But that's impossible," Lisa said, examining both images. "The photograph we found was taken after the girl disappeared. She's standing right there." Mildred shook her head slowly. "There are stories about this rest area. People say they sometimes see a little girl matching Sarah's description, playing on the swings or wandering near the prairie edge. Most think it's just local legend." The Millers left the photograph with Mildred, though Mark discreetly took a photo of it with his phone before they departed. As they continued their journey west, Emma became unusually quiet, staring out the window at the passing landscape. When Lisa asked what she was thinking about, Emma replied, "That girl. She told me something when I picked up the picture." "What did she say, sweetie?" Mark asked, glancing at his daughter in the rearview mirror. Emma hesitated. "She said, 'Don't let them leave without me.'" The Miller family completed their vacation as planned, though the experience at the Wilson Rest Area remained a topic of conversation. Emma occasionally mentioned the girl from the photograph, describing dreams in which she walked with Sarah through the prairie, looking for something the lost child couldn't quite identify. Mark researched the Henderson case further, discovering that the family had never recovered from the tragedy, eventually divorcing and moving away from Kansas. The rest area where Sarah had disappeared had been renovated several times since 1963, though the basic layout remained the same. A year after their encounter, the Millers returned to Wilson, hoping to find more answers about the photograph and the mysterious girl. The rest area attendant, Mildred, had retired, and the new staff had no knowledge of the incident. The photograph Mark had found was nowhere to be found, and no one could recall seeing it. As they stood near the spot where Emma had discovered the image, Emma suddenly pointed toward the playground. "There she is," she said. Mark and Lisa saw nothing but empty swings moving gently in the breeze. Yet Emma insisted she could see Sarah, standing near the prairie edge, watching them with the same sad expression from the photograph. "She's still waiting," Emma whispered. "She wants to go home." The Miller family never returned to Wilson Rest Area, though they often spoke of their experience. Mark created a documentary about the Henderson case for his history class, using it to teach about how historical mysteries can touch contemporary lives. Emma, now in her late teens, still occasionally mentions Sarah, describing her not as a ghost, but as a friend who exists between worlds. "I don't think she's scary," Emma told a reporter years later. "I think she's just stuck, waiting for something that probably will never come. Sometimes I wonder if we should have done something more that day, if we should have stayed longer or looked harder. But we were just passing through like so many people on these highways. We saw something strange, and then we continued on our way." No trace was ever found. It was March 2019 when delivery driver Miguel Torres picked up a hitchhiker on a desolate stretch of Missouri Route 5 between the small towns of Macon and Milan. At 28, Torres worked for a regional delivery service, covering routes that larger companies often avoided. His cargo that day consisted of medical supplies bound for a clinic in Milan, a journey that required driving through some of the most sparsely populated areas of north-central Missouri. The weather was unseasonably warm for March, with temperatures in the low 60s and a persistent fog that clung to the low-lying areas along the highway. Torres had been making this run for nearly 2 years and knew every landmark, every curve, every isolated farmhouse along the way. Around 3:45 p.m., as Torres navigated a particularly foggy section of the road, he saw a figure standing at the edge of the pavement, a young woman in a light jacket, thumb extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. Torres normally didn't pick up strangers, especially in such remote areas, but something about the woman's appearance gave him pause. She seemed familiar somehow, though he was certain they had never met. As he slowed his delivery van, he noted that she appeared to be in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and an earnest expression that seemed out of place in the desolate landscape. Against his better judgment, Torres pulled over. "Where are you headed?" he asked as the passenger door opened. "Milan," the woman replied, her voice soft but clear. "If that's not too much trouble." Torres nodded. "I'm going there anyway. Hop in." The woman settled into the passenger seat, placing a small backpack at her feet. She seemed relieved to be out of the damp air, though her clothing showed no signs of being affected by the fog. As they continued north, Torres attempted to make conversation, but the woman proved reluctant to share details about herself. When he asked her name, she hesitated before replying, "Anna." When he inquired why she was traveling alone in such an isolated area, she simply said, "Visiting family." Something about her responses felt rehearsed, but Torres attributed this to shyness or perhaps caution about sharing personal information with a stranger. As they approached the Chariton River Bridge, approximately 10 miles from Milan, Torres noticed something unusual. Despite the warmth of the day, the interior of his van had grown suddenly cold. He glanced at the climate controls, which were set to maintain a comfortable temperature. The woman beside him seemed unaffected by the change, staring straight ahead with an intensity that made Torres uncomfortable. The fog, which had been patchy along the route, now thickened dramatically, reducing visibility to less than 50 feet. Torres slowed the van, switching on his hazard lights as a precaution. "You drive this road often?" Anna asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. 2 or 3 times a week, Torres replied. "Why do you ask?" The woman turned to look at him. and Torres noticed something odd about her eyes. They seemed darker than normal, almost black, with no discernible reflection from the dashboard lights. "Some people say this road is haunted," she said quietly. "They say there are things that happen here that can't be explained." Torres felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the van. "I've heard stories," he admitted. "Every small town has its ghost tales." Anna smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. Not all stories are just tales. As they crossed the Chariton River Bridge, Torres's cell phone began to ring his wife, checking to see when he expected to be home. As he answered the call, explaining that he was just outside Milan and would be heading back south shortly, he glanced over at his passenger. To his astonishment, the woman had begun to fade, becoming translucent right before his eyes. Torres ended the call abruptly, rubbing his eyes as if to clear them. When he looked again, the passenger seat was empty, though the small backpack remained on the floor. Torres pulled over to the shoulder, his heart racing. He examined the van thoroughly, finding no sign that anyone had been in the passenger seat except for the backpack at his feet. The fog began to lift almost immediately, revealing the late afternoon sun. Torres sat in his van for several minutes, trying to process what had happened. He considered calling the police, but hesitated, unsure how to explain the impossible events. Eventually, he opened the backpack, hoping to find some identification that would explain the mysterious hitchhiker. Inside the backpack, Torres found only 3 items: a black and white photograph of a young woman who looked remarkably like his passenger, a newspaper clipping from the Macon Chronicle dated March 12, 1967, and a single dried rose. The newspaper article told the story of a 23-year-old woman named Anna Whitman, who had disappeared while hitchhiking on Route 5. The photograph in the backpack matched the one in the newspaper article, the same woman who had just vanished from his passenger seat. Torres felt his blood run cold as he read the details of the 52-year-old cold case. Anna Whitman had last been seen near the Chariton River Bridge, attempting to hitch a ride to Milan. Her body was never found, and the case remained unsolved. The Sullivan County Sheriff's Department logged Torres's call at 4:37 p.m. Deputy Thomas Miller took the report, examining the backpack and its contents with professional interest. "We get calls like this occasionally," Miller told Torres. "People who pick up hitchhikers who turn out to be ghosts from local legends. Most turn out to be misunderstandings or hoaxes. But this is different." Miller noted that Torres appeared genuinely shaken, and the details of his story remained consistent throughout the interview. The backpack and its contents were logged as evidence, though the Sheriff's Department had no intention of reopening a case that had been cold for over 5 decades. Torres completed his delivery in Milan, though he found it difficult to focus on his work. The return journey south was made in tense silence, Torres checking his mirrors frequently, as if expecting to see his mysterious passenger standing at the edge of the road. Torres never drove Route 5 again, requesting a route change from his employer the following day. He kept the newspaper clipping from the backpack, though he turned the photograph and dried rose over to the Sullivan County Historical Society. "I don't know what I encountered that day," Torres later told a local reporter. "I only know it was real. The cold in the van, the way she faded away. It wasn't my imagination." Anna Whitman may have died 50 years ago, but somehow she's still out there on that road, still trying to get to Milan. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever make it, or if she's doomed to repeat that journey forever. No trace was ever found. It was December 2015 when 3 college friends, Jason Martinez, Ben Carter, and Rachel Thompson, found themselves stranded on Minnesota State Highway 1 during one of the worst blizzards in the region's recorded history. The 3 seniors at the University of Minnesota had decided to take a weekend trip to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness for one last adventure before graduation. Despite weather warnings, they set out early Saturday morning in Jason's four-wheel drive SUV, confident in their ability to handle winter driving conditions. The journey north was uneventful until they reached the remote stretch between the towns of Cook and Orr, where the storm intensified with sudden ferocity. By early afternoon, visibility had decreased to near zero as heavy snow combined with powerful winds creating whiteout conditions. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills approaching 20 below zero. Jason, who was driving, slowed to a crawl, relying primarily on the road's edge markers to stay on the pavement. Ben monitored their GPS, which had become unreliable as the storm worsened. Rachel, who had grown up in northern Minnesota, watched the increasingly desperate weather with growing concern. "We need to find shelter," she said, her voice tense. "This is getting dangerous. This isn't regular snow, this is a ground blizzard." Jason nodded grimly, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "There's nothing out here. No towns, no farms. Nothing until Orr. And we're still at least 20 miles away." As if to emphasize his point, the SUV's tires suddenly lost traction, sliding into the ditch on the right side of the road. The vehicle came to rest at an angle, partially stuck in the deepening snow. Jason attempted to rock the vehicle free, but the snow was too deep, and the SUV's wheels only dug in deeper. The three friends sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of their situation sinking in. They were stranded in one of the most remote areas of Minnesota, in the midst of a historically severe blizzard, with temperatures dropping rapidly and darkness approaching. Ben checked his phone, no signal, of course. Rachel consulted the paper map they had brought as a backup. "There's a Forest Service road about half a mile back," she said. "It leads to some cabins, according to the map. If we can get back there, we might find shelter." Jason was hesitant. In this weather, we could get lost 10 feet from the vehicle. "It's better than freezing to death in here," Ben argued. "The gas tank is less than half full, and the exhaust pipe is already starting to get covered with snow. We can't run the engine all night." After a brief but heated discussion, they decided to make their way back to the Forest Service road. They dressed in all the cold weather gear they had brought, each taking a backpack with emergency supplies. Jason tied a length of rope to the SUV's bumper, hoping it would help them maintain their bearings in the whiteout. They set out around 3:30 p.m., knowing they had perhaps 3 hours of daylight left, though the storm made the afternoon as dark as twilight. The journey was immediately treacherous. The wind whipped snow around them with such force that it was impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. The temperature continued to drop, and the rope they had hoped would guide them quickly became buried in the accumulating snow. Within minutes, they had lost all sense of direction. They could no longer see the road, let alone the Forest Service turnoff they were seeking. Panic began to set in as they realized how truly lost they were. "This was a mistake," Jason shouted over the howling wind. "We should have stayed with the vehicle." "We can't go back now," Rachel replied, her face already red from windburn. "We don't know which way is back." It was then that Ben noticed something through the swirling snow, a light, faint but steady, perhaps 100 yards to their left. "Look," he yelled, pointing. "There's something over there." The three friends struggled toward the light, their boots sinking deep into the snow with each step. As they drew closer, they could make out the outline of a small cabin, smoke rising from its chimney. A lantern burned in one window, casting a warm glow into the storm. Relief washed over them as they approached the door, knocking with frozen hands. After a moment, the door opened to reveal an elderly man, perhaps in his 70s, with a thick white beard and piercing blue eyes. "You folks are in a bad way," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. Come in, come in. The storm's not fit for man nor beast." The cabin was small but warm, with a pot of something simmering on a wood-burning stove. The man introduced himself as Silas, explaining that he lived in the cabin year-round, serving as a caretaker for the surrounding forest land. He provided the three friends with dry blankets and hot coffee, listening patiently as they explained their situation. "Your vehicle will be fine until the storm passes," Silas assured them. "Happens all the time out here. You're lucky you found my place. Not many people know this road exists." As evening deepened, the storm showed no signs of abating. Silas offered the travelers his spare bedroom, insisting they stay until conditions improved. Rachel, feeling uneasy about their host despite his kindness, noticed something odd about the cabin. There were no modern conveniences, no electricity, no telephone, not even a radio. The food Silas served them seemed simple but nourishing, though Rachel couldn't identify the meat in the stew. "I don't mean to be rude," Rachel said as they ate, "but how do you manage out here with no communication? What if there's an emergency?" Silas smiled, a strange expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've been here a long time. I know how to handle emergencies. Besides, help doesn't come quickly to these parts, even with the best technology." Ben, who had been quiet since their arrival, suddenly spoke up. "I've been to this area before, fishing with my dad. I don't remember any cabins out here. I don't remember any Forest Service roads either." Silas's smile tightened. Memory plays tricks in the wilderness. Things aren't always where you think they are. That night, as the storm raged outside, Jason, Ben, and Rachel took turns sleeping, each maintaining a silent watch over their host. Something about Silas didn't add up, though none of them could articulate exactly what felt wrong. Round 2 a.m., Rachel, who was on watch, noticed something that sent a chill through her despite the warmth of the cabin. Silas's reflection in the dark window showed not the elderly man who had welcomed them, but something else, something taller, thinner, with features that seemed to shift and change like smoke. Rachel woke the others, and they quickly gathered their belongings. "We need to leave," she whispered. "Now." As they prepared to depart, Silas appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, fully dressed. "The storm has passed," he said, though they could still hear the wind howling outside. "You can go now." The three friends didn't hesitate, rushing out into the night. To their surprise, the storm had indeed diminished, with visibility improved enough that they could make out shapes in the darkness. They didn't look back at the cabin, instead focusing on putting as much distance as possible between themselves and their strange host. As dawn broke, they found their way back to the highway, where Jason's SUV was exactly as they had left it. The vehicle started without difficulty, and they soon discovered that the storm had passed completely, leaving behind clear skies and frigid temperatures. When they reached Orr, they stopped at the sheriff's department to report their experience. Deputy Mark Jensen listened patiently to their story, making notes as they spoke. When they described the cabin and their host, Jensen's expression grew grim. "There hasn't been a cabin in that area for over 30 years, he told them. "There was one, belonging to a man named Silas Blackwood. He disappeared during a blizzard in 1984. They never found him. Some locals say he still haunts these woods, offering shelter to travelers who get lost in storms." The three friends returned to the university, shaken by their experience, but grateful to be alive. They never spoke of the incident to anyone outside their immediate circle, unsure how to explain what had happened during that terrible blizzard. Jason sold his SUV, unable to overcome the feeling that something from that night had attached itself to the vehicle. Ben transferred to a college in a warmer climate, unable to face another Minnesota winter. Rachel completed her degree, but moved to the West Coast immediately after graduation. Years later, Rachel returned to northern Minnesota to visit family. She drove along Highway 1, stopping at the approximate location where they had gone off the road. There was no sign of a Forest Service road, no indication that a cabin had ever stood in the area. As she stood by the roadside, she noticed something half buried in the snow, a small object that glinted in the sunlight. She dug it out, discovering it was a pocket watch, its face cracked but still showing the time. 2:17 a.m., the exact time they had fled the cabin. The back of the watch was engraved with a single word: Silas. Rachel kept the watch, a tangible reminder of an experience that defied explanation. "I don't know what we encountered that night," she later wrote in a journal entry. "I only know it saved us from the storm, even as it terrified us." Sometimes I wonder if Silas was trying to help us, or if we were meant to become permanent residents of his cabin. I'll never go back to that part of Minnesota again. But I'll never forget the lesson either. Some things in the wilderness don't follow the rules we understand. No trace was ever found. It was September 2018 when highway maintenance worker Harold Wilson discovered something disturbing during his night shift along Ohio State Route 57. At 59, Wilson had worked for the Ohio Department of Transportation for 27 years, mostly on the overnight crew responsible for road repairs and maintenance during low traffic hours. He preferred the night shift, the solitude suited his introverted nature, and the reduced traffic made his work safer. Route 57, which ran through the rural areas of Medina and Wayne counties, was part of his regular rotation. The September night was particularly quiet, with a full moon that cast long shadows across the asphalt, and a cool breeze that carried the scent of harvested fields. Wilson's assignment that night was simple: inspect and repair guardrails along a 10-mile stretch between the towns of Lodi and Creston. He started his shift at 11:00 p.m., driving his maintenance truck to the southern end of his assigned section and working his way north. The work was methodical, checking each guardrail post for damage, tightening loose bolts, replacing damaged sections as needed. By 2:30 a.m., Wilson was approximately 3 miles south of Creston, working on a section where the road curved alongside a wooded area. As he examined a particularly damaged section of guardrail, his flashlight beam caught something unusual in the woods beyond a reflection that didn't seem to belong to anything natural. Curious, Wilson left his truck and walked toward the woods, flashlight cutting through the darkness. About 50 feet into the trees, he found what had caused the reflection, a small metal object, partially buried in the leaf litter. As he brushed away the debris, Wilson realized it was a handheld mirror, the kind a woman might carry in a purse. What made this discovery unusual was its condition despite being exposed to the elements. The mirror showed no signs of tarnish or weathering. Its silver backing was pristine, as if it had been recently manufactured. Wilson picked it up, noting that it felt unusually cold to the touch, even for a September night. As Wilson examined the mirror, his flashlight beam passed over the surrounding area, revealing something that made his blood run cold. Scattered among the fallen leaves were other personal items: a hairbrush, a single earring, a compact, a tube of lipstick. All appeared to be women's items, all in remarkably good condition despite being abandoned in the woods. Wilson's professional training kicked in, and he immediately recognized the potential significance of his discovery. This wasn't just random litter, it was a collection of personal items that might be evidence of a crime. Wilson returned to his truck, calling dispatch to report his findings. The Wayne County Sheriff's Department was notified, and Deputy Maria Rodriguez was dispatched to the location. When she arrived around 3:15 a.m., Wilson showed her the items he had discovered. Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran of the department, immediately recognized the potential implications. "This could be significant," she said, carefully examining each item. "We've had reports of missing women in this area over the years. Nothing recently, but there were several cases in the 1990s and early 2000s that were never solved." Rodriguez called for additional officers and a crime scene unit, though she knew it would be morning before they could conduct a thorough search. As they waited, Wilson continued to work on the guardrail, occasionally glancing toward the woods where he had made his discovery. Something about the situation bothered him. Not just the potential criminal implications, but something else he couldn't quite articulate. The woods seemed unusually still, even for the middle of the night. No nocturnal animals made sounds, no insects chirped. The silence was profound. Around 4 a.m., as Wilson was finishing his work, he noticed movement at the edge of the woods, a figure, partially obscured by trees, watching him. Wilson shone his flashlight in that direction, but the figure disappeared. Rodriguez, noticing his reaction, asked what he had seen. "Someone was watching us," Wilson replied. "A woman, I think. She was just standing there at the edge of the trees." Rodriguez searched the area with her flashlight, but found no sign of anyone. "Are you sure, Harold? It's easy to imagine things in the dark." Wilson was certain. "I've worked these roads for 27 years. I know what I saw. There was someone there." As first light began to break, additional officers arrived, along with members of the crime scene unit. A systematic search of the area revealed more personal items, additional cosmetics, pieces of clothing, jewelry. Most disturbingly, they found what appeared to be a makeshift campsite deeper in the woods, where someone had clearly been living for an extended period. The site included sleeping arrangements, storage containers, and numerous other personal items, all apparently belonging to women. The Wayne County Sheriff's Department launched a full-scale investigation, bringing in cold case detectives to review unsolved disappearances from the past 3 decades. Wilson's discovery made local news, with reporters speculating about a potential serial killer who had been active in the area for years. As the investigation progressed, however, it took an unexpected turn. Forensic analysis of the items found in the woods revealed something strange. None of them showed signs of long-term exposure to the elements, despite some being decades old. More puzzling, DNA analysis found genetic material from numerous individuals on various items, but none matched any missing persons records in Ohio or neighboring states. Detectives interviewed Wilson multiple times, asking for additional details about his discovery. During one interview, Wilson mentioned something he had initially omitted when he first picked up the mirror. He had seen a brief reflection in it that didn't match his surroundings. Instead of the woods and his maintenance truck, he had seen what appeared to be the interior of a bedroom, with floral wallpaper and a window showing daylight. He had dismissed this as a trick of the light. But as the investigation grew stranger, he wondered if there might be more to it. The case took another unexpected turn when a local historian came forward with information about the property where the items were discovered. According to historical records, the land had once been home to a small boarding house for women, operated in the 1950s and 60s by a widow named Eleanor Blackwood. The establishment had closed after Blackwood's death in 1967, and the property had been abandoned for years before the state acquired it for highway expansion in the 1970s. What made this information particularly interesting was that several women who had been residents of Blackwood's boarding house had disappeared under mysterious circumstances between 1960 and 1967. Local authorities at the time had investigated but found no evidence of foul play, eventually closing the cases. As investigators dug deeper into the history of the property, they discovered something even more unsettling. Eleanor Blackwood had been a practitioner of folk magic, specializing in scrying and other forms of divination. Among her possessions, which had been stored in the county archives, was a collection of mirrors similar to the one Wilson had found. Local legends, mostly forgotten by the time of Wilson's discovery, spoke of Blackwood's ability to see things in her mirrors, things that weren't physically present. The investigation eventually stalled, with no clear explanation for the items Wilson had discovered or the strange campsite in the woods. The evidence was cataloged and stored, but no charges were filed, and no connections to active missing persons cases were established. Wilson continued his work with the Highway Department, though he requested a transfer to a different route. He never worked along Route 57 again. 5 years after his discovery, Wilson retired from the Highway Department. During his retirement party, a colleague gave him a small wrapped gift. When Wilson opened it, he found a handheld mirror identical to the one he had discovered in the woods. When he asked where it had come from, his colleague simply said, "It was left on your desk with a note that said, 'For the man who sees what others miss.'" Wilson took the mirror home, placing it in a drawer where he wouldn't have to look at it. Occasionally, late at night, he would hear a faint tapping sound coming from that drawer, though he never opened it to investigate. "I don't know what I found that night in the woods," Wilson later told his daughter. "I only know it opened my eyes to things I had never considered before." There are mysteries in this world that don't fit into our neat explanations. Sometimes I wonder if those items belong to real women who met a terrible fate, or if they were somehow connected to Eleanor Blackwood and her strange practices. I've learned to live with not knowing, but I'll never forget the feeling I had when I looked into that mirror and saw something that couldn't possibly be there. No trace was ever found. It was January 2020 when long-haul trucker Frank Campbell captured something inexplicable on his dash cam while driving along Interstate 70 in western Indiana. At 42, Campbell had been driving professionally for 15 years, covering routes primarily through the Midwest. He was known among his colleagues for his meticulous maintenance of equipment, including multiple dash cams that recorded continuously during his journeys. Campbell considered these recordings not just for security, but as a visual diary of his travels across America's heartland. The night in question began unremarkably, a clear, cold Tuesday, with temperatures hovering around 20 degrees and a light dusting of snow on the highway shoulders. Campbell was hauling a load of auto parts from Indianapolis to St. Louis, a journey he made at least twice a month. He had departed Indianapolis around 8 p.m., planning to drive through the night and arrive in St. Louis by early morning. The traffic was light, as usual for this route at this hour, and Campbell settled into the familiar rhythm of highway driving. Around 10:30 p.m., as he passed the exit for Terre Haute, he noticed something unusual on the dashboard display of his primary dash cam, a flicker of static that lasted only a second. He attributed this to a temporary power fluctuation and continued driving. 20 minutes later, as he approached the Illinois state line, the static appeared again, this time lasting longer and accompanied by an odd distortion in the audio recording. Campbell, who was monitoring his cameras, as he often did during long stretches, felt a growing sense of unease. He had been using this particular dashcam system for 3 years without any issues, and the sudden malfunction seemed out of character for the high-quality equipment. As he considered pulling over to check the connections, something even stranger occurred, and the camera facing the interior of his cab briefly showed a figure sitting in the passenger seat, though Campbell was alone in the truck. Campbell slammed on the brakes, pulling to the shoulder and nearly causing a collision with a passing semi. He turned to the passenger seat, finding it empty as expected. His heart raced as he reviewed the dashcam footage, rewinding to the moment when the mysterious figure had appeared. There it was, a shadowy form, vaguely human in shape, sitting where no one should be. The figure appeared for only 3 seconds before fading away, leaving behind a distortion in the video that resembled heat shimmer. Campbell sat in the driver's seat, trying to rationalize what he had seen. A reflection? A glitch in the camera? His mind raced through possibilities, none of which seemed entirely satisfactory. After several minutes of deliberation, Campbell decided to continue his journey, though he kept a close eye on the dashcam displays. For the next hour, everything appeared normal, the cameras functioned properly, and no mysterious figures appeared. Campbell began to relax, chalking up the incident to a technological anomaly he couldn't explain. Around midnight, as he passed through the outskirts of Effingham, Illinois, the exterior dashcam suddenly captured something that defied all explanation. A figure stood at the edge of the highway, partially illuminated by Campbell's headlights. It appeared to be human in shape, but was impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, by Campbell's estimation. Most disturbingly, the figure seemed to be composed of something like smoke or shadow, constantly shifting and reforming, yet maintaining a recognizable humanoid form. Campbell slowed his truck, unable to process what he was seeing. The figure raised one arm, pointing directly at his truck, then stepped onto the highway and began moving toward him with impossible speed. Campbell reacted instinctively, flooring the accelerator and swerving into the left lane. As he passed the spot where the figure had been, he glanced at his side mirror, expecting to see nothing but empty road. Instead, he saw the entity keeping pace with his truck, moving with a fluid, unnatural motion that defied physics. Campbell's fear intensified as he realized the figure was gaining on him despite his speed of nearly 70 miles per hour. The interior camera suddenly flickered again, and Campbell felt an inexplicable cold spot in the passenger seat beside him. What happened next would become the subject of intense speculation and investigation. Campbell's dashcam recorded a series of events that seemed to violate the laws of reality as we understand them. The exterior camera showed the figure beside the truck, keeping pace effortlessly. The interior camera showed the passenger seat compressing, as if an invisible weight had settled there. The audio equipment picked up a low, rhythmic humming sound that Campbell couldn't hear with his own ears. Most disturbingly, all 3 cameras briefly showed the same image simultaneously, a face, pale and elongated, with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Campbell, overcome with terror, lost control of his truck, swerving across both lanes before managing to correct his course. As he regained control, he noticed that the temperature inside the cab had dropped dramatically, despite the heater running at full blast. His breath now formed visible clouds in the air. The mysterious presence seemed to recede, though Campbell could still feel an inexplicable coldness in the passenger area of the cab. He drove on, white-knuckled and trembling, until he reached a truck stop outside of Vandalia, Illinois. At the truck stop, Campbell immediately reviewed all his dashcam footage, documenting the bizarre events he had recorded. The evidence was undeniable. Something had appeared on his cameras that defied rational explanation. Campbell contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, requesting to speak with an officer. Deputy James Mitchell responded to the call, arriving at the truck stop around 1:30 a.m. to find Campbell visibly shaken but coherent. "I know how this sounds," Campbell told the deputy, "but I have video evidence. Something was on the road tonight, something that wasn't human." Mitchell, initially skeptical, became increasingly concerned as he reviewed the dashcam footage. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted. "The video quality is excellent, and there's no evidence of manipulation. Whatever this is, it's not a trick." The Fayette County Sheriff's Department logged the incident as an unexplained phenomenon, retaining copies of Campbell's recordings for further analysis. News of the incident eventually spread to UFO and paranormal research organizations, who requested copies of the footage. Several video experts examined the recordings, finding no evidence of digital manipulation or special effects. The most plausible technical explanation offered was that Campbell had experienced a series of simultaneous equipment malfunctions. Though this failed to account for the consistency of the mysterious figure across multiple camera angles. Campbell completed his delivery in St. Louis the next morning, though he admitted to being in a daze for most of the journey. He took several days off work, during which he had the dash cam system professionally inspected. The technicians found no malfunctions or defects that could explain the recordings. Campbell eventually returned to work, though he avoided night shifts whenever possible and installed additional lighting both inside and outside his truck's cab. In the months that followed, Campbell's experience became something of a legend among truckers and paranormal enthusiasts. Some dismissed it as a hoax or hallucination, while others believed it represented genuine evidence of something beyond current scientific understanding. Campbell himself remained uncertain about what he had encountered that January night on Interstate 70. "I've been driving these roads for 15 years, he told a reporter for a trucking industry magazine. "I've seen just about everything you can see on America's highways: accidents, strange weather, unusual wildlife. But nothing like this. I don't know if it was an alien, a ghost, or something else entirely. I only know it was real, and it was terrifying." 3 years after his encounter, Campbell retired from long-haul trucking, accepting a position as a driving instructor at a local trucking school. He kept the dashcam recordings, occasionally sharing them with researchers who promised to maintain his anonymity. "I don't talk about it much anymore," he told a former colleague. "Most people think you're crazy when you mention it. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel that cold spot in the passenger seat of my truck. I know what I saw, and I know what I recorded. There are things out there on these highways that we don't understand, things that exist in the spaces between our rational explanations. I'm glad I have the evidence, even if it doesn't provide answers. At least it proves I'm not crazy." No trace was ever found. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable, particularly along the endless highways that crisscross the Midwest. These ribbons of asphalt and concrete connect our communities, facilitate our commerce, and occasionally serve as the stage for encounters that defy explanation. The 8 stories we've explored tonight represent just a fraction of the unexplained phenomena reported along these roads. Each year experiences that linger in the memories of those who lived them, challenging our understanding of reality itself. What connects these disparate accounts? Not location or circumstance, but the element of the impossible intruding upon the mundane. A trucker encountering lights that move against the laws of physics. A family discovering a photograph that shouldn't exist. A state trooper meeting someone who vanishes into thin air. These are not the stuff of horror movies or campfire tales. They are documented experiences from credible witnesses who found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Witnesses whose lives were forever altered by what they encountered on America's highways. The Midwest, with its flat horizons and seemingly infinite roads, creates a unique environment for such encounters. The distances involved, the isolation of certain stretches, the very nature of highway travel at night, all contribute to circumstances where the veil between our world and something else seems to thin. Perhaps these highways, cutting through landscapes that have witnessed centuries of human history, absorb something of the past, occasionally releasing it to confuse and terrify modern travelers. Or perhaps these roads simply take us to places where the normal rules of reality don't apply, where the universe shows us glimpses of its stranger aspects. What strikes me most about these accounts is not the supernatural elements themselves, but the human reactions to them. The truckers who continue their routes despite what they've seen. The families who complete their vacations while processing impossible experiences. The officers who file reports that don't fit into any established category. These responses reveal something about the human capacity to absorb the inexplicable, to incorporate it into our understanding of the world without completely shattering that understanding. We encounter the impossible, we document it, if possible, and then we continue our journeys, changed but not broken. Silence plays a crucial role in these stories, the sudden absence of normal sounds that often precede something unusual, the quiet that follows an impossible encounter, the unspoken agreement among witnesses to sometimes keep these experiences to themselves. In our noisy modern world, these moments of silence become particularly significant, marking transitions from the known to the unknown, from ordinary reality to something else entirely. The witnesses we've heard from tonight often speak of these silences as more unsettling than the phenomena themselves of the absence of birdsong, the sudden deadening of a CB radio, the inexplicable quiet that falls along a busy highway. Memory, too, serves as a theme connecting these accounts. The historical figures who seem to linger along certain roads, appearing to modern travelers before fading back into the past. The objects discovered along highways that connect present experiences to events decades earlier. The way these encounters remain vivid in the minds of witnesses, years or even decades after they occur. These highways become repositories of memory, holding not just the physical traces of past events, but something more intangible, echoes of experiences that refuse to fade completely. The absence of answers perhaps defines these stories more than anything else. Unlike fictional narratives, which typically provide resolution or explanation, these true accounts end with questions rather than answers. The witnesses are left to wonder what they encountered, why it happened to them, and what it means for their understanding of the world. This lack of closure makes these stories particularly haunting, as they resist easy categorization or dismissal. They remain open-ended, inviting us to consider possibilities beyond our conventional understanding of reality. If you or someone you know has a true story to share, leave it in the comments below. The highways of America hold countless such experiences, waiting only for someone to listen, to document, to bear witness to the strange and inexplicable. Your story might help someone else make sense of their own impossible encounter, creating connections across time and distance that remind us we're not alone in these experiences. Thank you for watching Snowbound Screams. Until next time, stay safe out there.